London, early November, 1877. The persistent rain all morning felt like it was trying to wash away the lingering thoughts in my mind. In the dim light of the small study at 17 Brackley Street, I, Lucien Crowe, was busy stoking the fireplace when I heard the wooden door creak open behind me. Dorian Vale stepped in, slightly wet, his coat damp with mist, holding a long envelope wrapped in rough leather. As always, he said nothing, simply handed me the letter. I looked down. No return address. The wax seal had already been broken. But what sent a chill down my spine was a dark brown stain that looked like dried blood. Inside was something strange. A cracked shard of mirror, palm-sized, wrapped in black cloth. I didn't have time to ask before the oil lamplight hit it, and I saw nothing. Not a blurry or flickering image like a fogged-up mirror, but nothing at all. The shard reflected the wall behind me, the table, the lamp, but not me. Dorian retrieved a letter inside, scrawled in trembling handwriting, as if written mid-seizure. If you are reading this, I am likely already gone. But please do not believe in disappearance. No one is ever gone. We are replaced. At the bottom was a scribbled name, E. Harwood, and a brief address, Greyhaven, Midlands. 3 days earlier, the newspapers had reported a strange disappearance in Greyhaven, a small town in central England. A man named Harwood, living alone, had been confirmed by neighbors to be home the night before. The next morning, he was gone. Local police broke in. No signs of forced entry, nothing disturbed, no missing items, nothing stolen. The door was locked from the inside. The clock had stopped at 3 a.m. There was only one anomaly, a faint handprint on the surface of the mirror, as if someone had touched it from the inside. That evening, we left London on the midnight train. The rain thickened, drumming on the train's roof like endless whispers. Dorian sat quietly, poring over the town map, while I couldn't stop thinking about the shard of mirror. I took it out again just to look. This time, I saw something flicker past the edge of the glass. A fleeting figure. I turned. No one. And I began to wonder. Perhaps the terrifying question isn't who has vanished, but who is beginning to appear in their place. The train pulled into Greyhaven by late afternoon, the sun a dying ember behind a curtain of pale mist. The cold crept through layers of thick coats as if it sought to touch bone. I had never seen a town so utterly silent. No dogs barking, no children laughing, no voices, only the sound of our own footsteps echoing against cold stone. From behind curtains, townsfolk watched us. No greetings, no questions. It was as if they feared we might ask about things they didn't want to remember. The town's only inn was a moss-covered 2-story brick house. The landlady, thin and wary, greeted us with an expression not unkind but unsettled, as though she feared we might not be quite human. When Dorian requested a room with a mirror, she froze for half a second, then whispered, "I've hidden them all. There are none left." We took a room on the second floor. There were no mirrors, no paintings, nothing reflective. When I asked why, she replied, "People don't look anymore. No one dares." The first night in Greyhaven, I couldn't sleep. Outside the window, the fog seemed to shift, not in shape, but in presence. Faint shadows just beyond the edge of vision vanished when I looked straight at them. Downstairs, I heard the landlady whispering prayers, then the sound of cloth brushing glass, as if someone were covering a mirror, though none were supposed to be in the house. The next morning, we met with Officer Bradley, the local policeman who had personally handled the disappearances. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. Sunken eyes, pale skin, and fingers constantly twisting a wooden prayer bead bracelet, as if trying to calm something that wouldn't stop whispering. Dorian asked, Can you describe the scene of the most recent case? Bradley swallowed hard. I can't describe something that wasn't there, Mr. Vale. The door was locked, the lock untouched, no footprints, nothing disturbed, but there was one thing. That's why I didn't go home that night. He opened a drawer and took out an old photograph. It was of the victim's mirror. In the reflection stood a faint figure, someone directly behind the person taking the photo. I took this picture myself, Bradley said, voice trembling. I swear, no one was standing behind me. We left the station in silence. Dorian furrowed his brow for a long time. Finally, he murmured, "No one in this town has truly gone missing. They're still here, just not in the way we understand." That night, I dreamed again. This time I stood in a room identical to our inn's, except in the center stood a large mirror, and inside the mirror was me. But with my back turned, I tapped gently on the glass. The figure slowly turned around. It had my face, but its eyes, two deep, empty hollows, and its mouth moved, repeating the same phrase over and over. 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock. I woke drenched in cold sweat. The clock beside the bed read exactly 2:58 a.m. The next day, the sky above Greyhaven was still ash gray, like someone had covered it in ash and forgot to remove the lid. The world felt frozen, no wind, no birds, no motion. We visited the home of Martha Welker, a seamstress in her 30s living alone on the outskirts of town. She was the fourth person to vanish that week. The house was small, walled in, with a low roof, still sealed off by the police. "No one's dared enter since she vanished," Officer Bradley said, handing Dorian a key. "Some folks say they hear soft laughter from inside whenever it gets dark." The house was cramped. A thin layer of dust blanketed everything, as if even time had stopped here. The air was cold the moment we stepped in, unnaturally so. Dorian inspected every corner, every mark, every scratch, but the place was spotless, too spotless. No signs of struggle, nothing overturned. Everything in place, unnaturally perfect. But then, things started to feel wrong. The wall clock had stopped. At 3 o'clock, just like the others. A heavy curtain, finely hand-stitched, covered nothing, just an empty wall. On the table sat a small notebook. Inside, one sentence written over and over, hundreds of times. "I saw it smile when I wasn't smiling. I saw it smile when I wasn't smiling." Dorian flipped through the pages. Each line was written in a different hand, some shaky, some firm, as if written by many people, or one person, shifting through selves. In the bedroom, we found a full-length mirror, covered in a heavy black velvet cloth. Lucien's face went pale. "Should we uncover it?" Dorian didn't answer. He simply pulled the cloth back, and the room grew even quieter. No wind, no heartbeat, only the mirror, and silence thick enough to cut. It reflected the room, reflected us, standing still. But in the reflection, I was tilting my head to the left. I wasn't tilting my head. Dorian carefully removed the feather from his hat, held it in front of the mirror, and moved slowly, eyes unblinking. When the feather touched the glass, a faint sound rang out, like metal gently scraping against glass. Only he heard it. He stepped back. "The reflection is no longer a reflection," Dorian whispered. "It's learning to imitate." Before leaving the house, we checked Martha Welker's notebook. On the final page, another note, written in a completely different hand. "I don't know who I am anymore. I went to sleep, and when I woke up, I was on the other side. I saw myself, still living, still working, but it's no longer me." At the bottom, a faint line, like a desperate plea. "If anyone reads this, please don't look into a mirror after 3 a.m. On the way back to the inn, neither of us spoke. Nor did we need to. but in my mind, a single line kept echoing. I saw it smile when I wasn't smiling. I couldn't help but wonder, is something watching us through the mirror? And if so, how long has it been waiting to cross? We returned to Martha Welker's house that night, bringing our equipment, lanterns, and Dorian's annotated town map. No police, no townspeople. No one knew we were there. We didn't want to cause panic, especially when we ourselves didn't know what exactly would happen at 3 a.m. The mirror in the room was still there, tall, silent, and shameless, like a mouth not yet open to say something unspeakable. 2:36 a.m. Dorian scattered salt in a wide ring around the mirror, drawing protective symbols in white chalk mixed with ash. At each corner, he placed an antique silver coin etched with strange runes. Old Eastern European folk defenses, he muttered, eyes fixed on the glass. If we're wrong, at least we're wrong carefully. I nodded and sat down. In my hand, Martha's journal turned to the final entry. I think it's already stepped 1 foot outside. 2:59 a.m. The air shifted, suddenly and sharply, like an invisible door had shut. The lantern's flame flickered, its light choked, and from within the mirror, a thin layer of mist began to spread outward. From the inside, though all windows and doors were shut, we held our breath. 3 a.m. The minute hand ticked into place. The clock froze. I looked into the mirror, and my heart stopped. My reflection blinked. Before I did, I instinctively raised my hand, and the figure in the mirror followed, half a beat too late, but smoothly, too smoothly, not like a reflection, like something trying to mimic me. I turned to Dorian and saw that he too was facing a version of himself, but something was off. The reflected Dorian was standing slightly closer, not to the mirror, but to us. "Don't blink," Dorian whispered, and then his reflection smiled. Bang! The lantern sputtered and the mirrored figures began to move differently, no longer mimicking. I shot to my feet. In the mirror, my reflection remained seated, smiling, looking up at me as if it knew it had succeeded. I stepped back, and then a gray, gnarled hand reached through the mirror, as if glass had become water. Fingers long and bone-thin, trembling slightly, searching the air as if looking for someone. Dorian threw a pouch of powdered silver and mercury directly at the hand. A sharp, screeching sound rang out, like a scream made of glass and knives. But coming from nowhere, the hand vanished. The mirror cracked, but did not shatter. The fracture was like a trembling thread, so fine it could only be seen when the light passed over it. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, shirt soaked with cold sweat. Dorian stepped closer and picked up a tiny shard from the floor. "Mirror ash," he said. "This kind doesn't reflect with mercury. It reflects with refined quartz." He looked at me, his voice low. "This isn't a mirror. It's a window, and on the other side is a place that doesn't belong to us." I glanced back at the crack, and for a fleeting second, I swear I saw an eye, pale, pupilless, staring back. The following morning, after a night without sleep, we made our way to the abandoned church at the northern edge of Greyhaven. An ancient structure choked with moss, its steeple shattered, its bell long fallen, the tower leaning to one side as if dragged down by something heavier than gravity. The townsfolk avoided the place. They said ever since the first disappearance, whispers could be heard from beneath the chapel. Every night, no one dared go down. No one dared knock. No one dared look into a mirror if they accidentally passed too close. Inside the church, dust blanketed everything. Wooden pews rotted where they stood. Crosses were broken, the scriptures charred. At the far end of the nave, hidden behind a misaligned stone wall, we found a staircase descending into an old crypt, dark damp and heavy, with the smell of mold and ash. Below, our lanterns illuminated a small stone chamber, thick walls, no windows. At the center stood a crumbling wooden table, and atop it, a leather-bound book, green with mold. On its cover, a stitched-shut eye. Beneath it, in Latin, Speculum non mentitur, the mirror never lies. Dorian opened it. The handwriting inside slanted and trembled, growing more frantic with each page. Ink at first, then charcoal. The further it went, the more deranged it became, as if the writer's mind had splintered. The author was Father Thomas Wren, a priest who had lived in Greyhaven over 2 centuries ago. The first entry was calm, almost thoughtful. I no longer believe God is the only one watching us from above. There is another, one that watches me from the other side. The entries that followed were fragmented and chilling. I pray, it prays with me. I kneel, it kneels before me. But its eyes, empty. It doesn't blink, it only mimics. I've covered every mirror in the church, but in dreams, they still reflect me. And slowly, I can't tell the difference anymore. I hear it calling my name. And now, I've started answering myself, in the mirror. The final page was a jagged scrawl, burnt charcoal scratched onto paper like claws. They no longer need reflections. They've seen enough. And now, they want to switch places. Beneath it, a single crooked line, as if written during a seizure. Silent reflections. They are us, but not us. Dorian remained quiet for a long time after reading. He ran his hand slowly across the book's moldy cover, then looked at me. "We're not just facing a phenomenon," he said. "We're stepping into an ancient rite, one that's been repeated, and this time, it seems to be working." I walked toward the back wall of the crypt and found 13 mirror-shaped carvings, each etched with a name. But the final one was blank. Beside it, scrawled in charcoal, "The last one is the last to see himself after 3 a.m. I turned to Dorian. He gave a single nod. "And I think they're waiting." We returned to the inn at dusk, carrying Father Thomas Wren's journal, the first true evidence that what was happening lay beyond science or reason. Dorian spread the town map across the desk, pulled out a pencil, and circled 13 locations. Each circle corresponded to a house where a disappearance had occurred in the past 3 weeks. "Exactly 13 cases," he muttered, "and the spacing between them. It nearly forms a perfect circle around the town's center, where the old church stands." I looked at the map, then up at him. "You're saying each disappearance was part of a ritual?" Dorian nodded, his voice low and grave. "A summoning ritual, and each mirror was an open eye. A gate. What the silent reflection cult is trying to open isn't hell. It's the mirror world. A parallel realm, a place of fractured selves, beings who have always watched us from the other side of the glass. We don't look into mirrors, we call to them." The next morning, we visited the old mirror factory on the eastern edge of Greyhaven, a collapsed ruin once responsible for supplying mirrors to the entire region. In the archive office, buried among scorched and half-burnt files, Dorian found an invoice dated nearly 3 months prior. It read, "Order 13 black-framed mirrors, quartz glass, muted reflection. Deliver to Father Caleb, Greyhaven Old Church." "Father Caleb succeeded Father Thomas," Dorian said. "And if I'm right, he's the one who restarted a ritual that had been dormant for 2 centuries. That night, we split up and visited each marked house on the map. Silently, discreetly, leaving no trace. And just as we suspected, each home contained a nearly identical mirror. Tall, black-framed, with glass that shimmered a pale gray, not quite reflective, more like watching. In one abandoned house, I stepped close to one and looked in. Nothing, no reflection, only a faint mist like smoke and a sound. From within, like a heart beating, slow, heavy, trying to get out. Dorian took out his electromagnetic meter, and the needles spun wildly. "This isn't light reflection anymore," he said. "These mirrors are conducting something, a signal. Maybe they're syncing up. And when the moment is right, all 13 will open, together." Near midnight, returning to the inn, I lay awake, staring at the single mirror the landlady had forgotten to remove. It was small, oval, hung above the dresser. I watched it, watched me. Then I noticed my reflection was staring straight back. Unblinking, I frowned, tilted my head. The reflection stayed still. Then it smiled. At that moment, I heard a soft scratching at the window. Slow, deliberate, like fingernails on glass. I approached and drew the curtain. Nothing, just fog, so thick the mirror's reflection had vanished completely. But when I turned back, my reflection had returned, and it was closer. The next morning, Dorian looked at me closely, then said, "Tonight, when the 13th gate opens, we have to be there." I nodded, but my heart clenched, because the night before I knew what I saw. I blinked. My reflection did not. It only stared, like it had seen enough. The final night in Greyhaven. The air was heavy, as if an invisible hand were tightening around the throat of the town. No wind, no birds. The entire world held its breath, waiting for something to emerge from the dark. Dorian and I went straight to the old church, where it had all begun. The stone door behind the altar was already ajar, as if someone knew we'd be returning tonight. Beneath the altar, everything had changed. On the floor, a ritual circle of fresh blood, still wet. At its center, a towering mirror nearly 3 meters tall, its frame carved with symbols too ancient to decipher. Around it burned 13 black candles, each flame reflected in the mirror, but not in the same positions. A man was waiting. He stood in the middle of it all, cloaked in ash-gray robes, hood drawn over his face. Only his eyes showed, milky white, without pupils. "Mr. Vale, Dr. Crowe," he said, voice deep and distant, like it came from the bottom of a well. "You've arrived just in time. Only 2 souls remain to complete the ritual." Dorian drew his pistol. The man simply smiled, not with his mouth, but with those empty, inhuman eyes. "The silent reflection was never made of men," he said. "We are merely the bridge. 12 gates have been opened. Now comes the 13th. He raised a hand, pointing at the mirror, its surface trembling like water, and inside, a figure began to form. Humanoid, but faceless. No eyes, no nose, just a wide, smiling mouth. Lucien stepped back, gripping a silver torch tightly. "Is that the original?" Dorian nodded, eyes never leaving the glass. "That's the one Father Thomas sealed away 200 years ago, and it remembers who locked it in." The mirror made a sharp popping sound and split like thin paper. The thing crawled out, its body boneless, moving like a serpent. Then slowly it stood upright, mimicking Lucien's posture. "It imitates," Dorian whispered, "but it has never lived. It doesn't know pain, it doesn't know fear, and it no longer needs to pretend." The cultist raised both arms and began chanting in an old, guttural language neither of us recognized. The flames on the 13 black candles surged, not upward, but inward, into the mirror. At that very moment, 13 mirrors across Greyhaven began to shake. 13 doors opening in unison, 13 reflections ready to emerge. Dorian stepped into the circle of blood. From his coat, he pulled a small linen-wrapped object, a short silver blade, blackwood handle, etched with a symbol, a sewn-shut eye. "I didn't come to witness the ritual," he said. "I came to seal it, permanently." In a blink, the mirrored entity lashed toward him, its fingers long and gray, stretching like tendrils, searching for flesh. Dorian drove the blade deep into the mirror's base. Blood from his hand trickled into the crack. A scream erupted, sharp as 1,000 shards of glass. The mirror's surface writhed. The creature howled, melting from the inside out. Its mouth stretched open, revealing dozens of human faces writhing within. All across town, 13 mirrors exploded in succession, every reflection gone, leaving behind only one reality for now. The high priest collapsed. His robe slipped from his shoulders, revealing a chest with no heart, only a hollow pit where one should have been. It's fine. The gate is ajar. One day, they will remember the way. He crumbled into ash. We left the crypt just as the sun began to rise. On the road back, I glanced into the display window of a shop along the street. I saw Dorian walking beside me, but his reflection didn't walk in sync. It was half a step behind. We departed Greyhaven in the morning mist. No farewells, no waves. But this time I saw eyes peeking from behind curtains. Alive. Genuinely alive. Perhaps in some way we had broken part of the ritual, but only a part. On the train back to London, Dorian sat silently, reading Father Thomas Wren's journal. I tried to sleep, but I dreamed again. I was standing in a mirrored room. Walls, floor, ceiling, all made of glass, and in every reflection was me. But not one of them was the same. One version of me was younger, another older. One had coal-black eyes, one was crying while its mouth was smiling. At the center of the room stood one mirror, completely blank. It reflected nothing. I stepped closer, and then it began to show something. Not me. Dorian. Standing still, but his eyes weren't Dorian Vale's. I jolted awake. The train was nearly back in London. Dorian stood at the window of the carriage, his hand resting gently on the frosted glass. I walked up to stand beside him. The morning light cast our reflections onto the window. I glanced at them, then looked again. Dorian's reflection didn't move. It didn't blink. It stood straight. It stared, and after a second, it smiled. "Did you get any sleep?" Dorian asked, his voice soft as mist. I hesitated. Number I dreamed of the mirror room. Dorian turned toward me, his eyes deep and steady as always. "I dreamed the same thing," he said, "but I don't think they're dreams. I think they're memories." I asked no further. Weeks later, back in my private room in London, one quiet night while washing my face, I found myself staring into the small mirror above the basin. The candlelight flickered. I looked in. My reflection stood there. I tilted my head left. It tilted with me. I squinted. It squinted. I raised my hand to touch my cheek. It did the same. But half a second too late. I dropped my hand, stepped back, unblinking. The reflection smiled. I sat at my desk, opened my journal, and I wrote the final line in the case of Greyhaven. If one day I look at Mr. Vale and he no longer feels familiar, if I remain silent too long before a mirror, if I ever ask myself, who am I? Break every mirror. Don't hesitate, because I'm no longer sure the one writing this is still me.